I've never heard of it.
I've never seen
We
one of
got all
those.
kinds of grants from the state when I was on the school board, and they always seem to end in 2 or 3 years. And then we're left to go back to our budget to start figuring out how to pay for what we started.
But it's not to continue the jobs, it's the infrastructure, and it's more infrastructure?
As far as infrastructure, like I said before, I'm not sure in terms of economic recovery, how that's defined. I mean, that's something that if we don't have an answer, does anybody can speak to that?
Oh, here you go, you got it.
I'm familiar with those regulations. That only applies to the recovery of existing businesses or the creation of new businesses with these funds, and then there's a commitment that the employment remain in place. That's what that is.
But are they county employees, city
They'd
employees?
be private employees of a private company. If we assisted a company
Okay.
that was wiped out and put them back in business, they have to make a commitment that so many employees would be, that's what that's about. And I don't know that we'll be in a position to
No.
use these funds for any of those purposes in this situation.
That's what I just wanted to find out. that word grant is a good phrase when you first hear it, and then when the grant runs out, sometimes it's scary. So, thank you, sir.
Commissioner, yes, Commissioner Keefe. I ain't coming back to you, Mr. Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple
button
questions.
turned off.
Mr. Jackson, and I'm not sure if you can answer all of them, but let's give it a shot. First of all, I'll start off with, I see about 34.7 million reasons that we should really be actively talking about combined community development, because a lot of these problems that we're working on are dealing with areas. There are certainly some areas that were affected more by Hurricane Matthew. Some areas of our community didn't really see much devastation, but others received a lot. I was very pleased to see that you have a clause in here of I know a number of these areas are continually having to battle the idea of flooding, even on large rainstorms. It would seem to me not a very smart thing to do to try to build in those areas. So do I understand that you will allow no building in anything that is in a flood zone, in a flood plain, or in something like that?
My understanding per HUD and FEMA requirements is that you're going to have to look at low risk when it comes to that. I mean, or else those risks have to be mitigated, which means you've got to use
Okay.
the funds to mitigate it before you can actually do the construction, et cetera.
Well,
So,
let me go ahead and
I
segue right
agree.
in.
Yes.
Let me segue right in. I hear the city of Fayetteville talk a lot about stormwater, and we have these same challenges here. I'm not seeing anything dedicated to mitigation of this. I mean, we're a week out of possibly the biggest storm ever to come up in the United States East Coast, and we could very easily have the same problems here. Is any of this money able to be used to mitigate these type of problems that we had last time in flooding and and I understand that it's community development money for HUD and housing, but what good's a house if it's flooded? So we have to be able to use those, and instead of building community development shelters, let's make it safe. I mean, so where is the safety part of the mitigation of flood? Because this money is Hurricane Matthew money.
Right. So if there's, for example, a need with a house and somebody qualifies, it may be that if they're in an area that's a floodplain, perhaps that they need elevation of that home. So that may be an approach. And so some of it depends on the individual. Do they qualify? And what is their need? And where are they located? So I can't sit here and give you a blanket answer, but I think that if there's a process, the process will address the different needs. And if it involves mitigation, then there's potential for it to be mitigated.
Mr. Keefe, can I, and I'm not trying to cut you off, can I ask the county manager one question? Why, and I know this is a public hearing because we have to have the public hearing, but when would the commissioners, either in finance committee, be able to address these things and kind of to do that? Because I think everybody has a number of questions. I know there's a deadline. I saw the deadlines. I'm not trying to cut you off, but I just think that's probably a better place to be, because we're going to eventually have to address where this money goes. So
Yes, sir, that's a good question. And if you'll recall, Mr. Jackson, at the August policy committees originally laid out these projects. At that meeting, we had a deadline, I believe, of October 1st or October 15th. After the policy committee meeting, the deadline for us to submit our final application was moved up to September the 15th. And that's why we were bringing it this morning and including it in the public hearing presentation. It's my understanding that the application has to be in by the 15th. The state has to approve these projects. But what we also understand is that we can continue refining these projects along the way. Is that correct, Mr. Jackson?
That's my understanding. I mean, as we go through this, it's going to have to be refined. We've been pushed
Okay.
to provide information and to provide an application. It's very general, as you can see. Some of it says yet to be determined or to be determined. So, we're trying to meet the requirements that have been placed before us and at least submit what appears to be a well-thought proposal and application.
So we can do that before the second public hearing, because that second public hearing wouldn't take place till the 18th if this has to be in on the 15th.
Well, this is the second public hearing today.
The first one was held by the city of Fayetteville.
Okay. So, I'm about to say,
Yes.
I'm the chairman. I'm like, good Lord, I'm really going to sleep on this. So it doesn't have to be that each one of us had to do two. We just had to do two. Okay.
A
You
total
got to
of-
tell me that.
a
I'm
total of
sitting up
two.
here.
Yes,
I think
sir.
I'm going to get you, but Mr. Keefe had
I'm gonna finish
Tracy,
up
you trying to get me.
Okay, I've got two. We had a person here from the Home Builders Association talking about availability, and they touched on affordable housing and the different thresholds. What is the determination of the need for affordable housing? And I'm still not sure exactly what the definition. I heard Dee when she talked about income levels, but affordable housing. So tell me what the gap is in Cumberland County of affordable housing. Because we're talking about building a bunch of houses here, a bunch of residents, multifamily or whatever. So what is the gap?
You have any specific numbers?
Come to the microphone, please. Thank you, Dee. Ms. Taylor.
I cannot give you specific numbers, but based on our reports of the number of potential applicants that have approached us, inquiries, based on past reports from those residents who have been counted as homeless based on the information that we obtained from local residents based on their income. There is a large gap, and based on reports from Public Housing Authority, their wait lists. I think the last information that I obtained through the Public Housing Authority, there's a wait list of almost, I know it was over 600 plus. It was to the point where they had to stop taking applications. So there is a great need based on that information. And even though there's demolition that is about to be going on with the Groveview Terrace and additional units to be added, it still won't be enough to address the gap that exists in our community. So that's the reason why you see quite a few multifamily housing units that will be built. Majority of course, all of them will be targeting incomes, household incomes 80% or below, because that's the requirement. But we are thinking about designating some also for those with household incomes 30% or below. You have a lot of residents that are living on fixed income, or that's barely making enough income to afford rent. I mean, you have those that are living on SSI. $733 is not enough to pay a $500 rent even. So,
I understand. I understand that. But, and maybe I misunderstood. I thought affordable housing my definition of affordable housing and yours was different. You're talking about government subsidized housing. You're talking about a housing, Hope 6 type project.
Well, let me back up a little bit, and not to get away from your question, but we weren't prepared this morning to answer the questions you asked. We'd be glad to get the information for you. But I will say the state in its action plan, it looked at all the different counties and the different needs when it comes to affordable housing. I don't have those numbers right here at my fingertips for you for Cumberland County, but we'll get those for you.
Okay, my last question, and I'll
Yes.
finish up here. There are a lot of to be determines on
Yes,
here.
sir.
Is it acceptable for us to go forward with to be determines, or do you have to fill these in? Because this
At
is
some
a
point, we
$35
do
million
have to,
project.
yes. At some point, we do have to, but my understanding, our understanding of staff is that we turn this in the way it's been laid out, and then the state will work with us to better define these projects.
Okay.
To be frank, it's such a tight deadline. There's a lot of challenges with trying to flesh this out in a short time frame.
Yeah, and our representative from the state concurs with this?
Don't hear you, but talk.
That deadline is set at September the 15th. We had some conversation on Friday to see if we could extend that deadline. I was informed that Cumberland County and the City of Fayetteville should go forward with the September 15th deadline, with the notion being that you're not in any competition with anyone else. The remaining 46 counties have to submit a grant application by October the 6th, no later than October the 20th. Those applications are competitive.
Right.
So those four are not in any competition. So my urgency was to make this, go ahead on and move forward with it. And once you guys meet again to have your final approval for that on the 18th, is to provide some type of documentation to the state that you did approve this, and you can move forward with what you're doing. I don't see any problem. Did talk to them about it, but they said that deadline is the 15th, and it's pretty much cut in stone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Council.
I understand that we are dealing with government, and we know that government moves at its own pace, and we don't determine a lot of this, the answers. It's a work in progress.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm concerned that we meet the deadline of the 15th and want to know what we can do to have updates put on our committee calendars and then to the full board some kind of way, because a lot of these questions have generated other questions. And if we are having this much trouble trying to maneuver this, and Hurricane Matthew's birthday is when? October 7th. October the 7th. Whenever I read this in my materials, I was just horrified at what is going on in the other part of our country. And thinking about what we have to do just to get this straightened out, because there's no pattern. So I want to move that we, I can't, you got to do what?
I got to do a public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to lose the money while we're talking
Yeah,
about,
this is just questions to Tracy from the presentation.
because
then we have
I
to
have some
the,
more
public
questions.
hearing.
I have some more questions too,
Yeah.
and
So
they're
let me do
along this
that.
same line, but I don't want to lose the money while we're asking
Right.
questions.
Well, and I think one of the things that
I'm sorry.
I think for these commissioners, those items that you put up there in terms of where the funds were going were suggestions from staff that the commissioners can weigh in if you think there are something that you may see, but we need to get the proposal up to be able to get the 34 million and then we can tweak everything from there. I was at the other meeting, I think that's where we are, but I would like to see, I think it get to some committee so that the commissioners could have some kind of, not this one, because this one's
Input.
Thursday, some kind of input. But with that, I think we do have to have a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing, ask Madam Clerk if there are any speakers.
There are no speakers.
Then I will close the public hearing. And then I guess we're asking for a motion now to be able to move forward on this grant application. Is that what we're doing?
Yes, and that's my motion, that we move forward with this block grant with
CBGI.
CB,
Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery.
Yes.
yes, and hope that is positive, results are positive. I
Second,
move that we
second.
move forward.
I'll second the motion.
It's
Thank
been
you.
moved and second. Any other questions? If not, all those in favor?
Unanimous.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Thank you from the state. And Mr. Sharp, thank you for coming in on this matter. Items of business as consideration of ordinance allowing the sale of alcohol beverages before noon on Sunday. I call on Commissioner Booth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've all received from our county attorney the proposed ordinance, and I think it's in line with what the rest of the NCRLA have indicated. An overwhelming number of people that are giving people the option. It doesn't require anybody to have a drink. It does make you drink 2 hours earlier than you were sitting around chomping at noon anyway. So it just, for the restaurants, for tourism, just for basically individual choice, I would move that we allow the sale of alcoholic beverages before noon on Sundays pursuant to the resolution prepared by our board attorney.
Second.
And just to bring clarity to that, because this is the county, it's in the unincorporated areas, does not deal with any of the municipalities in Cumberland County. So that's just for clarification. Commissioner Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question here. In regards to this ordinance and it affecting the rural area, how many businesses, small businesses, do we have in the rural area does anybody know that would be affected by this? And how many businesses, period?
I don't think we have the exact number, but this would apply to like the Kangaroo and Quickie Marts that sell beer. I mean, it started out as this thing, the whole process in the state legislature started out as just a mixed drinking restaurant, but it's broader. It's for anybody who's already permitted to sell alcoholic beverages. Their permit will now extend to 10 o'clock a.m. on Sunday morning.
Well, from what I understand, and if I read it incorrectly, it's because I don't have my glasses on. But from what I understand, that it was supposed to assist small businesses, that it would help as far as finances with small businesses and other businesses in the rural areas. And so I was just curious to know how many businesses, small businesses, and businesses, period, that it would affect. Now, I understand that we had Kangaroo, which is a multi-business throughout the state of North Carolina.
I think they identified 8 locations in the unincorporated areas of the county. But I think that may be the only, unless the county manager has more information, the only company that contacted. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, no.
And that's 8 locations?
Yes, sir. And Commissioner Evans, the language in that ordinance about that stuff is because the board, to do an ordinance, needs to have a finding of necessity for it. And that's what that precatory language is, and that's the standard language that's being used for all these ordinances. But that's what that is.
The language of this ordinance is because of the finding necessities of it.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
what's the finding necessities of it?
Well, the things that are stated in the ordinance,
Okay.
for the assisting small businesses, meet their customers' preferences, that sort of stuff. Yes, sir.
I'm done. Thank you.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Voting in favor, Commissioners Faircloth, Keefe, Chairman Adams, Commissioners Council, Lancaster, and Booth. Voting in opposition, Commissioner Evans.
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
do want to point out, I believe this will have to come back at the next meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct. It did not pass at this hearing. It'll have to be heard. And at the next vote, it will, a majority vote will pass it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We are down to nominations to board and committees. Joint Planning Board, we got 2 vacancies, and I think we have 2 reappointments to that. If I could
Right.
get somebody.
I'd like to nominate Ms. Diane Wheatley and Mr. Carl Manning.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Manning was here just a little bit earlier. That's all. We'll go to number 6, appointments to boards and committees, Parks and Rec.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have some questions regarding one of the nominees, and so if I would like to ask that we pull Scott Pope until the next meeting and appoint Stacy Carter III to the Cumberland County Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission.
Second.
Can I ask a question? What was the question?
We had a letter, but I think, you're talking about on Mr. Pope? There was a letter that came in that was sent by individual, and then I think Commissioner Lancaster actually talked to Mr. Pope, and we just trying to get some more information. I think he changed jobs, and there was whether he would be able to dedicate the amount of time that he needed, and we wanted to give him the opportunity to be able to address that. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay. So with that, if I can get a second?
I did.
Okay, so the motion is to appoint Stacy Carr III. We're just gonna hold in abeyance, the appointment on Scott Pope. It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor?
Unanimous.
All right. With that, I will, call on Commissioner Fairclough. Can you do that? To go into, closed session?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This time I would move that we go into closed session for attorney-client matters pursuant to General Statute 143-318-11A3 and for an economic development matter pursuant to
143-318A, 11A4.
that. That was it.
If I can get a second.
Second.
Been moved and second to go into closed session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
All right. We'll go into closed session.
I wish they would have recognized that. I don't think they did.
I heard that. One, two.
I'd make a motion to probably die for lack of.
Application, but it is, I think I asked you this question. Is it
Oh, that's right. That sounded really good. Yeah, I went last year. Give me one second. Can I receive a motion to go in the open?
So moved.
If I can get a motion, second? Second. Been moved and second. All those in favor?
Unanimous.
Motion to adjourn? So moved. Second? All right, unanimous. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe that's what the answer.
What is little Mr. Lee?